All right, and welcome to the program. It is the day before Thanksgiving Day, Thanksgiving Eve. It's pouring buckets out there. Hopefully that doesn't impede your shopping expedition today in any way, and you're able to get the turkey and all the good stuff. That's a song that I learned as a young whippersnapper back at the Lincoln Elementary School.
Yeah,
Remember
really
that one?
digging deep for that one. No,
Yeah.
I think that's probably before my time.
Over the
Barry.
river. You didn't learn that in school?
Over the river.
Over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house we
well,
go?
what people who are listening to this can't see is the cartoon that you're playing with this song, with a little kid and his dog dancing around. So,
yeah.
So I get the full benefit of
the whole
your
thing,
selection
yeah.
today.
Absolutely. I don't think we'll
Thanks
see
for
that on TV. We are, by the way, videotaping again, so you'll be able to see us on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and look up the WBSM channel, you can see the mayor and me sitting here and Jonathan in the back over there. I'm not sure if you're on camera, Jonathan, but nope, Jonathan's shaking his head. He doesn't want any part of that action. So we'll be here until 1 o'clock.
He's just here to put words in my mouth.
There you go, and hand out papers and stuff, you know.
Yeah, here's the answer.
He's here to protect us from ourselves.
He has the teacher's addition to your test.
There you go. Well, with teachers, we're going to talk about teachers a lot today. We're going to talk about schools.
We can talk about anything. We can talk about the songs of your childhood.
Well, it is Thanksgiving Eve, so I wanted to give you a chance to, maybe wish the folks a happy Thanksgiving and all that kind of stuff. What are you thankful for?
I'm thankful for a lot. I'm thankful, first of all, for my family, my loving wife, and the marriage that we have. We're really two very busy people who support one another, and we are blessed with 3 beautiful daughters, and who, give us lots of joy. And I'm thankful for being an American. I'm thankful for all the blessings of liberty that come with being an American, and I feel blessed that I live in the city of New Bedford. It's a great place to call home. It's a great place to raise your family, and I'm lucky. I feel fortunate that I have the opportunity to do just that, to raise my kids in my city.
So life is good right now.
Life is really good for me. Yeah. Don't judge my busyness or the demands of the job or what people say about me on Facebook.
People talk about you on Facebook?
That's all a sideshow. It's all a sideshow. It doesn't matter. It's I get up every morning, and I have a job that allows me to help people out, and that's what really jazzes me up. It's very gratifying that I have that opportunity.
Do you check Facebook? See what people are saying?
So I'm not personally on Facebook. I honestly don't know how to log on.
Right.
We have an official Facebook account. We have a Facebook account that is associated with, as like other elected officials, with my political campaign, and I have people who monitor that stuff for me. But I don't have the time to sit there and go through comments. I have people who look at those comments and give me feedback. I mean, there are things that are said on Facebook that I should know to get a sense of how people are feeling. It's a useful tool in that way, but I don't sit there and go comment by comment. I tried. There are folks who help me sift through all that, and same thing with the radio. I mean, same thing with everybody else. I mean, I'll put on BSM when I'm in the car, but I don't sit and listen to the radio all day long. And if people are talking about something on the radio that's useful for me to know, then I'll get that feedback.
In the old days, you'd have to wait till you walk out on the street and somebody would yell out their car window, "Hey, you bum, you!" Now it's instantaneous. I mean, within moments. People are probably already on Facebook right now commenting on what they're hearing you say. I mean, it's amazing how quickly people can.
Well, they say different things, right? There are certain things that people will say online, and even on the radio, in all candor, that they wouldn't say face to face. It's not to say that I'm gonna, throw down with somebody on the street because they've badmouthed me. It's just that it's not that.
But that feedback is instantaneous now.
Well, it's feedback that's of a different quality, Barry, nowadays, and it's dangerous too, because. There are things that I'm convinced that social media is starting to erode civil discourse in America, and because people will say things that, I mean, there are lots of reasons for it, but one of them is that people will say things that they wouldn't say, in a face-to-face meeting with folks, and it's usually very negative, and I think that's dangerous. I think people need to be mindful of that.
Is it positive, though? Does it have its positive aspects, too? Being
I
able
think
to get that feedback instantaneously?
it does, and I think you know, the power of Facebook, of social media, is its ability to disseminate information so quickly, and to cut through barriers, right? And so the decentralization of media has its benefits, right? So, you know, that you're able to get out information to folks without having to go through, you know, a newspaper in the traditional way is important, because it's you know, I think that's very democratic. I think the tough part with Facebook and other social media, but primarily Facebook, is that as we've seen in places, especially in the Middle East, but also in parts of America, it's hard to get people to rally behind something, right? No, it's the kind of it's good. It's a good way. It's a good mechanism to break down problems, but it's not a good. It hasn't proven yet to be a useful mechanism to get people to rally behind a specific cause and to act as a team. So you've seen in places like, I mean, pick one of those Middle Eastern countries that went through the Arab Spring, right? So like you look at like Egypt, right? And I don't mean to sort of, this is just an example, but you know, you've had all these dictators that fell in the last 4 or 5 years in the Middle East, in part because, you know, there were uprisings that were spread that grew as a result of people talking to one another on Facebook, and that's a good thing to get people out of power. But then after everything fell apart, like, how do you put it back together again? And it's, you know, as we've seen here in the United States, it's hard through social media to get people to rally behind something, new, to build something, and so I think that's something that we have to be mindful of. It's here to stay. This is the way we communicate now.
It does have its benefits, though. I mean, for example, Amber Alerts can get out almost instantaneously. If you need to implement an emergency, I don't know, whether it be a snow parking ban or whatever, storm warning or any kind of emergency information, boom, it's out there in the hands of thousands of people instantaneously.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. It's yeah, absolutely. And you can get eyes on things very quickly. I remember, I'll just tell you a story. You know, I mean, I think, you know, when, you know, I mean, I think a lot of folks who've been listening to our program know that, you know, when I was an assistant U.S. attorney, I was the prosecutor assigned to find Whitey Bulger. And, you know, I can remember, and this has been written about in a couple of books that have come out about Bulger since, you know, in the last few years, but I caught on to this idea of using Facebook. This is circa 2009, right? Not ancient history. To use Facebook to get his image out into the public and to have people spread it. And so we came up with an idea that involved putting out a reward for him, a smaller reward that, and I think we're talking like $50,000 or $100,000 on top of the big reward that the FBI was offering, but to get people to spread the word by saying it, like, if you're the person who identifies him, you get you get, I think it was half of the reward, and the person who emails you gets half of that, and the person who emailed that person gets half of that, and so forth, right? And by that way, you encourage people to spread the word. And you know, so that's 2009, when Facebook was still pretty new and not ubiquitous like it is today, and we thought that would be a good idea. And then eventually, you know, there were a number of reasons why we didn't go down that line. Some of them had to do with just money, but you know, I look back at that and I think there's no way that Whitey Bulger would be able to hang out in Santa Monica, California for as long as he did today with the way Facebook is. That word would just get out to everybody, and people would, and he would be found very quickly. I mean, that's how much technology has changed things just in the last few years. And there are plenty of other examples,
and
but
the
that's
fact
just
that
one
people
that
have
I personally
camera
experienced.
phones that, you know, snapping photos.
Yeah, the proliferation of cameras and mobile devices, and
Yeah.
the way that people communicate now. I mean, we saw it in the most recent election. You know, my election this year, it was very the way that people interacted with their campaigns was, and talked about municipal affairs is very different even than it was 2 years ago. An election 2 years, it's that much different. It's so much centered around social media now that, you know, you can have an event, a campaign event, a debate or whatever, some kind of rally, and you have, as we did, you know, 50 or to 100 people show up, but there might be, you know, literally 100 times that many people watching it online, and that's become common now. So, you know, the question for everybody, for elected officials and for anybody who cares about, and it should be everybody, about, you know, the course of their city and the way how their government performs is, you know, how do you build trust on social media? And that's hard. It's a harder thing to do because, you know, we're accustomed to building trust by looking somebody in the eye directly across from you and discerning whether this is somebody, discerning one's intentions, right? Is this somebody I can trust, or does this person mean me harm? That is a harder thing to establish when you're just emailing somebody back and forth, right? You just don't know. And that has some real implications for our democracy, and it has implications for the way that you know, our government performs and who wants to run for office, and, you know, how we solve problems collectively as a society. And that's something that's going to take a while to sort out, it seems to me. And so I tend to be I'm the biggest optimist when it comes to our particular city. For America, I'm concerned about about the implications of social media and what it means for trust among our citizens.
Nice segue into a matter the City Council took up last night, and that is a desire by some to be able to report nonviolent crimes online to the police department. Have we gotten to that point? Is that something that you're comfortable with?
Oh, I think people should use whatever means are available to report information to the police. I don't think and the police do get that information. I don't think you need an ordinance to establish that. If people want to send an email to the police department or a text, whatever, a tweet, you know, do it. You know, the more information the police have available, the better.
So a special online site or page or whatever to go to report, it's not necessary with the technology that we have currently?
No. I mean, there are anonymous text lines that we've used in the past. I can't say as I'm sitting here whether that's something that the police department still avails itself of, but there's usefulness in that. We have anonymous tip lines, phone calls. That's you know, that's easy enough. People, even in an age of social media, are still using telephones, the telephone lines, to communicate. So, yeah, I mean, the more the better. The more information that comes to police, the better.
All right, so NOAA says the Northeast Fisheries Sector 9 involving fishing licenses that were in the possession of Carlos Rafael has to be shut down. Now, this is a head-exploding issue for a lot of people who don't understand all of the ramifications, or what all of this even is, or what does it mean. So what is it, and what does it mean to us?
Yeah, so, yeah, there's a longer explanation to this, which I'd be happy to offer.
What is Sector 9?
So let me just, if you don't mind, let me just step back and give people a little bit of context, because I think, you know, we read, you know, fishing's a big part of what we do in New Bedford. Obviously, it's a big part of not just the city, but greater New Bedford and beyond. And so it's useful to talk about, you know, how we got to this point. So a few years back, I can't remember the date, 2010 or so, you know, NOAA began to put in place a new system to regulate the groundfish industry. So when we talk about groundfish, it's the stuff that the draggers catch, right? It's the traditional, the fish that are generally associated with the traditional New England fishing industry. So that's cod, it's haddock, it's flounder, and all different types of those things, and a few other fish, right? It's the fish that swim near the bottom, right? Though those stocks have declined a great deal, as we all know. There's always, and still is, a difference of opinion about between fishermen and regulators about how much they've declined, but they've declined. And up until 2010 or so, and I might be off by a year or so on the date, but there had been in place what were called input controls, right? In other words, the effort that could be put into catching those fish was limited. So those include the days at sea regulations. That fishermen could only go out a certain amount of time in any given year to catch ground fish. Net size was another one. I mean, there are a handful of those things. So in 2010, NOAA moved away from that and created what's called a catch share system, which is something that has been in place on the West Coast fishing industry for a number of years. And what it basically says is we're gonna give individual fishing permit holders a slice of a pie, and we determine the slice of the pie, that is, now how many fish can be caught annually, based on what the historic record shows, as well as what our future projections show in the way of fish populations, right? So you have a pie, the annual catch limit, right? Total allowable catch, and there's all these formula that goes into determining that. And so, but you are allocated what's called quota, if you're a permit holder, that you can, which is an amount of fish you can catch for any given stock, cod, haddock, flounder, whatever, in any given year, and you can trade that amount, right? So you can say, well, my allocation's not so great, and I would rather sell it to somebody else and let them fish it, right? So this stuff is traded, and it's traded within what are called sectors, right? So there are groups of permit holders that are that readily trade within their group, and those groups are sectors, and the sectors are managed by a governing body, by a board of directors, and have all sorts of internal rules as to how they can go about their business, and they're responsible for, each sector is responsible for reporting accurately the amount of fish caught in any given year, and so that's how it works. So Sector 9 refers to is a group of 22 boats and permits, ground fish boats and permits, that are based on, I think every single one, maybe there are a couple of exceptions, are based in New Bedford. And just about all of them are owned in whole or part by Carlos Raphael. And so what happened this week was that NOAA decided that that sector had not accurately accounted for its fish over the last few years, in part because a lot of those boats were part of the fraud that Carlos had committed, right? He was lying about what he was catching and how much, and that it didn't have in place the measures to ensure that there would be accurate accounting in the future. I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but basically what they said was, look, we got to shut you down because we don't have confidence that you're going to do this accurately. I think, there are some arguments why that step shouldn't have been taken. I spent a lot of time talking to NOAA folks, and a lot of time talking to folks who are associated with Sector 9, including their attorneys, and here's the upshot. The upshot is it's going to put the decision, whether it's right or wrong, is going to put a number of fishermen on the shelf for through the end of the fishing year, which is May 1st. And that's harmful. I mean, this time of year, I mean, a lot of fishermen rely on this time of year to buy Christmas presents. I mean, this is going back for years. Remember, this is the time of year fishermen catch fish, and you go out and there's a demand for more fish, and fishermen buy Christmas presents and other things this time of year. It's like that's the way it's been for a long time. And I think that's going to this decision by NOAA will harm those folks economically. I think there are a lot of shoreside businesses that are going to suffer, not immeasurably, but not in a huge way, but certainly will
There's a ripple effect. A lot of
feel it, whether it's places like Crystal Ice or Sea Fuels or Radars Manufacturing, which makes gear. There are lots of it. Some of the settlement houses and so forth. So there's some economic harm that comes with this. Look, this is Carlos Raphael deserves to go to jail. He deserves to be punished. But we're at a point now where, regardless of whether this was the right thing to do, there's still a big part of the case that isn't wrapped up. So this administrative order concerning this particular shutting this particular sector is separate from NOAA's decision whether to impose civil penalties against Carlos and maybe some others involved, like some of the captains who were involved in his fraud, and to pursue the forfeiture of certain of his vessels and the permits. Right, that's a whole other thing. That's what we've been talking about. So, and then on the criminal case, and this is where again it gets more complicated. The criminal case is being the forfeiture order in the criminal case in which Carlos was required to forfeit 4 of his boats is being appealed by the Department of Justice because they think that more boats should have been ordered to be forfeited. The argument, the upshot of all of this, Barry, is that the government, and I've been talking to them and I'll continue to have more conversation, the federal government needs to wrap all of this up. This is they're taking way too long to make decisions about the civil penalties. They need, and this sort of enforcement by dribs and drabs is causing all sorts of uncertainty on our waterfront, and it's putting at risk, I think, a big sector of, and I use the term sector loosely, a big portion of our fishing industry, a sizable portion of our fishing industry that will, if ground fish are eliminated, we essentially become a scallop port. And I know we do things like lobsters and herring and surf clam. We catch just about everything, but it's largely scallops, and reducing the diversity of our industry is going to hurt the port in the long run. It's obviously going to put some people out of work, which is bad enough. So my argument, and it will continue to be, and there are more meetings for me set up, and I've been talking to a lot of folks at different levels of government, is that there should be, we should allow for a deal to happen between Carlos Rafael and folks who operate right here in the port that allows for the transfer of those vessels, and Carlos can use the proceeds of those sales to discharge his forfeiture responsibilities, his forfeiture obligation, and whatever fines he has to pay to the government. That's the way it should happen. And frankly, it's just clear as day to me that that's the way this case should proceed. I'm not convinced yet that NOAA fully understands the necessity to proceed that way, but I'm going to continue to press my case.
So how many fishermen are directly impacted by Monday's decision?
So it's hard to say because, these days, it's really hard to say for a lot of reasons. One is that, these days the crews work more than one boat, more than they used to in the past. It's also, the crews are also smaller than they used to be in the past. We're talking 5 or 6 member crews in most of these boats. It's hard to know how much of their quota they've already caught up through this point in the fishing year. So if they've caught most of their quota, it might not affect them that much. I mean, fishermen these days don't go out as much in the winter as they used to, which is a good thing because it's winter time's the unsafest time to be out at sea. So it's hard to say. We know that there's about 80 fishermen or so who are on these vessels, we think, but it's hard to know how much of, how many fishing opportunities are left in this season for them. But again, I mean, I offer this long explanation because this is just to convey to people that this stuff is complicated. And
I'm glad you did, because this is complicated and it's Greek to a lot of folks. And, the history of it is good. So.
It is, and look, for me, I'm in a position where I have some credibility here because I've been around the fishing industry, but also, just given my prior life in federal law enforcement, I can at least speak to those people with some understanding, and hopefully we're going to have an outcome to all this that works to punish Carlos Rafael appropriately, that keeps the permits and therefore the fish in New Bedford, and allows the industry to move on.
So a week ago we sat here and we talked about Dr. Pia Durkin and the evaluation process, and next day she handed in her letter of resignation. I don't think it had anything to do with what we had to say. I really don't. But
was it something you said, Barry?
She decided it's time to move on. She was on the program on Monday, and we spoke for quite a while, and she feels as though it really doesn't make any sense for her to try to go on beyond this school year because the incoming school committee and she have pretty different points of view on the direction that we should be going in. So we're in the market for a new superintendent. So how does that process play out?
Well, indeed we are, and so I think we'll see more more clarity in the next couple of weeks. But in general, my goal is my philosophy on what we need to do in the school system has not changed at all. I'll just say that for starters, is to get the very best person in there to continue to build on the foundation that's been laid. I think there is, I think her time here has been a net positive. There have been substantial improvements in a number of areas, important areas, not far from perfect, but a number of improvements, and we have to continue to build. I think what anybody who's looking at this position would want to know is that that the city is interested, the school committee and the mayor are interested in continuing improvement, and not just allowing a sliding back to the way things were. I can tell you that ain't going to happen as long as I'm in this office.
But how does that discourage candidates, or does it discourage candidates who are looking at New Bedford now and saying, "Gee, you get somebody that goes in there and breaks a couple eggshells and moves things, offends a few people, and they ride around town on a rail."
Yeah,
Why do I want to get involved?
I'm not sure I would accept that characterization.
Okay.
But I think in the last 5 years, the school committee has demonstrated an unusual level of support for a great many hard decisions that have been made, and we're prepared to continue.
We've got a couple of new members who are coming in who base their campaign on replacing the superintendent. So
I'm not sure. I think in the case of John Oliveira, there's no doubt about that. With Colleen DeWicki, I think what she said, for the record, and her position was that she thought that she wouldn't support an extension of her contract. But I think she would agree. And I had breakfast with her this morning, and I think she made clear to me that there have been significant improvements, but her feeling was that there shouldn't be a contract extension. If I'm wrong in characterizing their positions, I'm sure they'll let you know. But yeah, I mean, the school committee is a body of 7, and so there are 5 members that will be continuing on the school committee, and I think by and large, it's fair to say that we want to continue to see improvement. And my discussions with John Oliveira and Colleen DeWicki, they want to see continued improvement too. We can't allow the school district to become. There is something. Let me just say this: it is harder in this day and age to educate kids in cities as opposed to suburban communities in general. Requires a higher level of intensity and more resources, and that's because we are charged with, as distinguished from in days past, of making sure everybody moves, everybody improves in their educational performance. Gone are the days when you could have half of a high school class drop out, and even though the kids who stick around, not worry about most of them, and just worry about the kids at the very top and how they're performing, and worry about the athletes and all that. These are important things that we still have to worry about, but we have to worry about everybody. We have to concern ourselves in an era in which of standards-based education, right? So standardized test scores, and we're judged by that as a school district and as a city, frankly. That we have to make sure that everybody's moving along, and that is inherently harder because, let me just complete the thought though, that's a harder thing to do in cities because you do have, we like every city, we have more poverty than suburbs, and so that means that there are kids who come to school with barriers. I think those barriers could be, they never went to preschool, they may have
the parents
turmoil at home of all sorts. There may be language barriers, right? That's cities are where immigrants gravitate to, and that's the fact that we are an immigrant city is a strength, but it also means that we have to spend more energy and resources getting kids who don't speak English as a first language up to speed. So it all requires more. So that means that being the superintendent being a successful superintendent requires a high level of focus and purpose and intensity and energy. And I think we need to understand that going forward. It also means you have to build relationships. You have to build strong relationships with the school committee, with parents, with teachers, and all that to get, because that, again, just getting back to one of the original things we were talking about in this program, that builds trust. And so when you make tough decisions and you don't have that trust in place, people are going to assume the worst. And that's what we have to be guarded about as we move forward.
So how wide of a net do we cast?
Well, for the best candidate comes from California, great. I mean, it should be nationwide. I think in all likelihood that most of the interest will come from Massachusetts, and that is in part because, career educators who might be have risen up to the point where they would be a viable superintendent candidate are probably people who've been in, and I don't mean this to say this in any sort of cynical way, but will be folks who've been have an interest in being vested in the pension system here, because those pension interests are sometimes hard to transfer from state to state, right? If you spend 10 years in Louisiana and 5 years in Pennsylvania, and then you do 10 more in Massachusetts, I don't think it adds up to 25 years in Massachusetts for pension purposes. So we're probably looking at someone from Massachusetts, I suspect. There's also, every state's a little bit different in terms of what the state requires of school districts and the level of scrutiny and the level of the breadth of educational mandates. And so having been in Massachusetts is probably an advantage. All that said, I don't care where the person comes from. We just want the best person.
Well, what I hear from the listeners is they want somebody to come from within. Somebody that knows the district, knows the problems, and knows the kids. So, would that be a preference? Somebody local?
I don't have a preference. If the best qualified candidate is sitting, right, in one of our schools or somewhere else, I mean, it's local, great. But we want the best person.
How will the search process work?
Well, I suspect so. I think there's more to happen here. I think it requires a discussion of the school committee, but. These things typically happen and have happened here.
Too often, right?
No, not under my watch, Barry.
Well, over the last 10 years, we've had how many superintendents in New Bedford?
I wasn't mayor 10 years ago.
Well, I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying we've had too many. We've had a lot of superintendents over the last 10 years.
That's exactly why.
Yeah.
So when I got into office and we had put Mike Shea in as an interim, and Mike did a great job in bridging the gap, and we did a search committee that was unassailable in its credibility, and so we wouldn't have the problem that we've had in the past here, where search committees have been essentially a cover for predetermined decisions.
Yeah, my uncle needs a new job, so we're going to make him superintendent.
So that has not been the way that we did. That wasn't the way we did our last search, and it won't be the way we'll do this search. So in the last search we had. That was chaired by Bridgewater State President Dana Molifaria. We had a number of folks from the school system there, a teacher, a parent, principals, and someone from the Gates Foundation on there. It was a very credible search. I think people felt.
How did it go so wrong then? Because nobody's satisfied with the results of this. I think that I'm probably the only one in town that thinks this is an awful mistake, that we're letting a good superintendent get away.
When you say how did it go wrong, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, if we had so many qualified and so many people who are experts in this, we picked Dr. Durkin, and nobody's satisfied with the results. How did we not find?
I'm not sure I buy your character. You sound like you're satisfied with the result when you say nobody. You've heard my take, which is. I think it's been a net positive. It's not to say that we should be doing.
No, but I get a sense that you would not be would have not been too unhappy if we went in a different direction. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean I did get a sense from you that if we did decide to go in a different direction, you wouldn't have been too disappointed by it.
I think so. I think what happened in the last few years has been, and again, I mean I've said this many times. I think it's been. A huge difference from where we were in 2011. Mm-hmm. It is a very, very different school district.
Yeah,
now.
I agree.
And it has, but here's the thing: it has to continue to build. And how do you build that? Well, you need a level of intensity and direction and knowledge and focus from someone, whoever occupies that position, to continue to drive improvement, drive it and drive it and drive it. But you also need to build, that person also needs to build relationships, because again, if you're in a position where you have to make tough decisions, at some point you have to let people trust that you have their interests in mind, and in the absence of those relationships, it's really hard to do.
She says that she believes, and I think I may to some degree, that because she is a woman, she gets categorized, is differently than a man that makes tough decisions, and that she's just a mean old son of a bee, because she's a woman. Women are bitchy, where men are good, strong leaders or whatever. She felt that the sexism thing had something to do with her unpopularity. Do you agree with that?
So I think, just as a general matter, professional women do have it tougher than men. I'm not speaking specifically about her case, but I think in general women do have it tougher. I'm married to a very accomplished professional, and I can see how, in the course of Annie's career, being a woman in a position of authority and leadership has been tougher than what I think I would have endured if I were in her shoes. And I've seen that with many of my female friends who are accomplished. It is harder. I think there is a double standard. I don't know that I can't say that would sum up some of the relationship issues that Dr. Durkin had in the community, though.
All right. How do we proceed with John Oliveira? We've got a newly elected school committee member who's got a no trespass on him and can't go into any of the school buildings, and at least at this moment can't, unless he gets an invitation, I guess, to go to his first school committee meeting. So how do we resolve that?
Yeah, I think, well, our attorneys will look at that. I think, look, I haven't had a chance to talk to him since that episode, and I will. I've been catching up with a lot of stuff, but he, I think he's a guy who, like me, has kids in the school system. He cares deeply about the course of the school system. He wants the best for his kids, and he wants the best for all the kids in the school system. And I certainly want all of the school committee to be on the same page about next steps.
Well, there's a certain decorum and protocol involved in being a public official, and I don't think you'd find too many people who would argue that he behaved properly last week on Wednesday and Thursday. What do you think of the way he behaved and handled himself?
Yeah, so, it's hard to, I think by his own admission, I think he said that he would do things differently. I don't want to get into the details, and because, again, it's not, there are different versions of what transpired, and I'm not about to officiate that. But what I will say is that look, there's a lot of work ahead, and that we've got to keep lines of communication open so that we can do what we are sent there to do as school committee members, which is to make sure that our kids get the very best education that we can muster.
All right, we can fly out of New Bedford to Florida. We're going to talk about that in just
a
second. Let me take a break, though. I'd like to hop on that plane right now. We're running really late. Let me get a break.
This is the latest you've gone without a commercial, Barry.
Well, it's been an interesting conversation. It always is anyway, but a lot of interesting stuff today. So let me do the break. We'll come back. We'll get an update on how you can fly to Florida. When is the first inaugural flight? I think we should do our show that day, and we'll fly down to Florida on Elite. What do you think?
If you pay for my ticket,
if
sure.
we can schedule it on a Wednesday. Well, they won't give us a pro gratis. Is that, can we do that?
If you ask them, sure, we can do the show from 30,000 feet.
Yeah, I think that'd be cool. Totally cool.
How do we get back?
Oh, well. All right, let me take a break. We'll come right back after this.
Details.
All right, welcome back. And Elite Airlines going to be flying out of New Bedford, about once a
December
week?
16th it starts.
December 16th. And
Yeah.
so they're going to go to Vero Beach once a week, round trip. And
Yeah, I can't remember where Vero Beach is, but I know
it's on the west,
I know
it's
it
on
must
the
be
East
next to the
Coast.
water.
Yeah,
Something
it's on the
tells
East
me,
Coast.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Something
the,
in the name tells me it's near the water.
what is that place there? The Villages. I think the Villages have a place there. I know Disney's got a place out in Vero Beach.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're going to be doing that. So this is just the start of something big.
Well, we hope so. Look, we hope to grow it. About 2 or 3 years ago, I asked the airport to do a market study for demand for commercial air service around here. In other words, if we had an air carrier here, would people go on it? And the market study came back and said, yeah, people are interested. People are interested in going to Florida. They're interested in going to New York, which shouldn't surprise anybody. If you think about, if you live in New Bedford or Greater New Bedford or even down the Cape, the prospect of going to Providence is not an easy one, or going to Greene, because Greene Airport is on the other side of Providence by drive. And so that's 45 minutes away. And forget Logan Airport. That's a huge distance away.
Yeah.
So, the idea that, you could take a flight to Florida from New Bedford is really appealing. I mean, think about that. I mean, you go there, you don't have to go to a parking garage. You pull up, you pay probably the cheapest parking anywhere on the East Coast for airports.
Or just take a cab.
And you just or have a family member drop you off. You just walk into the terminal. There we built a TSA checkpoint, and you walk right in. And it's that easy. So for anybody who's regularly goes through the hassles of air travel, it's a piece of cake. And so we did that. We did that study, and then we moved from there and said, let's see if we can become a real airport again. So that's why we went through what's called the FAA Rule 139 certification process. That's the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, has a process by which airports can be certified for commercial air travel. So we went through that and did a lot of work. Spent a couple $100,000 in taxpayer money. I think well invested to do a TSA checkpoint, right? Security point. We have done work on the runways. We got a little bit of state money, as was announced last week, to paint the runway. I mean, there were a number of steps that you have to take. We bought a fire truck for the airport, and we got the certification. And a lot of credit goes to the chair of the board, Paul Barton, the Airport Commission, and all of the board members, and as well as Scott Service, the executive director at the airport. And so now we have an opportunity to start commercial air service. So they're starting off slowly. This is just going to be a seasonal thing, but it's a good airline, and I would encourage people to use it, to try it out once. If you have to go back and forth to Florida, if you go down there for a couple of weeks, like so many people do here, give it a shot.
All right, we got very limited time left, so we're going to grab a couple of calls here. Next on the air with Mayor Mitchell. You got to put your earphones on there.
Yeah. So by the way, there is $239 each way. That's not bad for Florida all the way. Yeah.
Okay.
In the middle of winter, that's a pretty good deal.
Nice little getaway. Yeah. You're on the air with Mayor Mitchell. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to talk about the fishermen, the problem that we're going to have with NOAA, and the fact that only you, Mayor Mitchell, and Richie Canasta are out there working to get those licenses and solve the issues that we have with NOAA. Where's Ed Markey? Where's Elizabeth Warren? Where's our governor? Where's our state senator and our state representatives? They're nowhere to be found.
All right, good question. Where are the troops?
Well, I can. I appreciate, Mike, your question. I do work hard for the fishing industry. I would do it even if I weren't the mayor, because I believe it's an industry that's so important to us. And so I can only speak for myself. It's a huge part of our economy. It's a huge part of who we are as a city, as a port. Not just the city itself, but all of Greater New Bedford. And I spend a lot of time learning this stuff up so that I can credibly advocate for the industry. There aren't that many people out there, elected officials, who are versed in this stuff. and
There aren't any.
I don't claim to have a huge knowledge base here. I know enough to be dangerous, but you know, there are a few people on Capitol Hill who
Time they bone up, no?
Yeah, I mean, a guy like Bruno Freitas on Senator Warren's staff knows a lot. Bruno's from New Bedford and was Barney Frank's chief of staff. He's certainly a valuable guy in Washington. And I was on the phone with Ed Markey yesterday, Senator Markey, to talk about a little bit about this and a little bit about some port infrastructure as well. So
Did you find the number on the milk carton?
Stop.
Let me grab one more for you before we let you go. You're next on WBSM with the mayor. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Al, is that you?
Yes, it is.
You sound a little under the weather, Al. You staying out of this raw, rainy weather we're having these days?
Well, let me put it this way. The ground has got to be dry before I can take that iron horse out.
Okay.
The ground is wet. The bike stays in the garage.
Good. Keep it that way.
Yes.
What you got for us, Al?
Now, the issue is that I have, it's going to be short and brief and right to the point. 3 points. One, the waste of the barrel needs to be put back at the bus stop where the St. Anne's Church is.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, the tree needs to get replaced next to it. Number three, that motorhome needs to get removed.
Still there?
Is that the big black one?
Still there. No, not the black one. The black one's gone.
Oh, good.
So there's another one.
Yes.
Yeah, we looked into that though, Al. I think then we looked into it, and it's registered, and it can park on the street.
Yeah, it may be registered and stuff.
So he's cool. He's all set.
But there's one
I
thing
guess,
that,
yeah, we did. I mean, Al's brought it up a couple of times
Right.
for understandable reasons. Some of the other neighbors have brought it up. It's
and
sits on.
there's one thing.
It's
does
not right on
not
Black
have
Ave. It's on
a
one of the
valid
side streets.
inspection.
I've only got
Yeah,
about a
but-
minute left.
In any event, we've looked into it. The guy can park there.
All right, thanks, Al. I wanted to, and I don't know if you can do this in a minute, but what about the bells of St. Lawrence? Any chance that the city can step in and save those bells?
It's tough. I was baptized there. My father was baptized there. All my kids have been baptized there. I'm a parishioner at St. Lawrence, as a lot of people know, and so it is painful to see that. I also have known Father Powell for a long time, and he's a good man. And and I know Suzanne Sullivan, who brought this, someone else who I like very much. So I'm closely tied to every facet of this. It's a tough thing, and if there are ways that I can be helpful, they know that they can all of them can call me, and I can.
Is there any place to display one or some of those bells in the city because of the historic nature of them?
I'm sure we could find a place for them. It's not an idea that's been brought forward, but I'm if people have suggestions, I'm game for it. I mean, it's hard for city government to. I mean, I wear two different hats. I'm a parishioner at St. Lawrence, but I'm also the mayor, and there is a separation of church and state. So, look, if I can be.
Well, they don't belong to the church anymore. Now they belong to a private company.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, if I can be helpful, I mean, I get it is a painful thing, but and if I can be helpful, I certainly will.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Same to you, Barry.
We'll see you next week.
You bet.
All right, Mayor Jon Mitchell. We'll be back after the break. Stay with us. You're listening to 1420 WBSM, and you can watch this if you want to go look at it. It's on our YouTube page, so go check us out. See you in a minute.